have a session called Ask a Recruiter, Career Insights for SU Alumni. We have three amazing humans to introduce you to, who will share their advice, share their expertise and their knowledge and all that good stuff for you all. I see people still continue to come in the room, which is great. I try to put myself in your guys' shoes quite often because, as you know, John and I offer one-on-one coaching sessions and we meet with you virtually. And I think sometimes the job search process and all of that is something we don't want to go through alone. So we want to bring you this session so that you don't have to. So we will kick things off next with having our lovely recruiters actually introduce themselves one by one. And so you can get to know their background a little bit. We'll kick it off just with a quick one or two questions, and then we'll open it up to all of you for you to ask your questions. So I will start with Nicole.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Jimenez. I am originally from Syracuse. I'm resided here in Syracuse now as of a year. I received my master's in social work from Syracuse, and funny enough, went into recruitment soon after. So I've been recruiting for over a decade. A lot of my experience is in media and entertainment. I spent the last decade in California before coming back to Syracuse. And right now I'm working in the fintech industry, but on the non-tech side.
Okay, Sunny.
Hello, how are you guys? I'm Sunny. I am a 2020 graduate. I majored in broadcast and digital journalism, which I did not do. And yeah, after college, I had left. I had actually done entertainment production for a couple of years. And then later on in my career, I was like, I'm going to pivot. And I pivoted into recruitment. So I work for a company called eClaro. I normally do private equity, insurance, financial services. Once in a while, we'll get some engineering, some more technical roles. And I predominantly work within perm placement, which means people who, are, VP level, executive level. And that's I'm based in New York City. So yay.
Perfect. And let's round us out with Wendy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Wilsker. I am a 1990 graduate from Newhouse. I was an advertising major. I did not work a day in my life in advertising. Some of you may have had a part-time job at school working in telefund. That was me. And several years after I graduated, I went into fundraising. So I spent about half of my career in fundraising, fell into executive search, as many people do. I'm currently managing partner. Oh, hi, Rob, a telefund vet, best job at college. I'm a managing partner with Boyden. I lead our nonprofit practice in the United States. And so we work exclusively in higher education, healthcare, and the whole spectrum of nonprofit, pretty much at the executive level, but also in some mid-level roles as well. So great to be here.
Love it. So sometimes when people give their background a bit, we think, oh, they're a recruiter in an industry space that I don't want to be in. That's okay. They have great knowledge in general as well. And so we're going to go in the same order for question number one. I'm just going to kick it off and say, I think this applies to everybody. I'm not going to say it's a burning question, but if you could just expel a couple myths about how long recruiters or HR folks in general, whether it's from your perspective or people you've seen do this, how long do resumes actually get reviewed for? Could we just come out of could we just tell the truth right from the get? All right, so we'll go Nicole, Sunny, Wendy, and then whenever the next person is done.
I mean, sad to say, if I've spent 30 seconds to 45 seconds, usually I'm looking for some keywords for whatever that position is, and then I'll give it a longer look. But sort of initially, I would say under a minute.
I definitely agree with Nicole. What I'll do sometimes is if I don't find the keywords, I put them in a special file and it's like almost like my late night reading. Maybe sometimes I'll go back to it and actually look and I'm like, okay, can I maybe filter this person into another job that I'm pipelining for? But during my actual work day, it's like, yeah, under 30. I'm like, if I don't see it, it goes off to the side, definitely.
I would say I spend maybe probably 1 to 2 minutes on a resume. I want to look for a few key things. I want to make sure that there's some data in there. I want to see especially how long candidates were in certain roles. I want to see if there's any gaps in their resumes. And I think because of the nature of our work for mission-driven organizations, I want to get a sense if someone's including their volunteer experiences, really to have a sense of who is this whole person? Are they initially meeting the requirements of the role and then looking at, some of the preferred background and qualifications?
Right.
All right, so Jess and I wanted to highlight one more question before we open it up for all of you guys to ask the questions that I'm sure you've got today. So wanted to shift the next one here to interviews, and this is something that Jess and I get asked a lot when we're working one-on-one with folks. So wanted to throw this one out there to these three great folks. The question is, what are hiring managers and panels looking for when the same question is asked across multiple rounds of interviews? This has happened a few times to this alum, and they're trying to figure out, is there pressure to give the same answer? Should they give a different answer? And are interviewers comparing notes across rounds of interviews?
Ooh, that's a really great question. Okay, so I've seen it done a couple different ways at a few different places. I'll say for right now, they don't compare notes. We try to discourage that until after the interview so that there's not a creation of bias. So sometimes when the same question comes up, in my experience, it's been because they all sort of want to know the same thing. So you don't have to worry about necessarily having some crazy different example for each of the interviews, but you do want to make sure that the example that you are using is really strong across the board.
I definitely agree with Nicole when she says that you want to make sure that the answer that you're giving is something that's one consistent, uh, because you want them, because my disagreement comes with the fact that most of the clients that I work with, they do compare prior to the final stages. Like they're all sitting next to each other. They're going to be talking about what they thought about this person because that's how people keep getting moved forward, at least in my experience. Sometimes if somebody finds inconsistencies with one part of like your example and some other person's, well, they thought they said this, like it leads to confusion, which then leads to being like, is this the right candidate? So I would say if you have a specific example, use that one repeatedly. Be like, you could even bring up the person's name. Like, let's say you interviewed with Nicole and you interviewed with me. Like, oh, I was actually just talking to your colleague Nicole about this. I was letting her know this and that. She had mentioned you guys do something similar or had a similar situation. I'm happy I was able to, like kind of express it again because it's something that I'm like particularly proud of. But I do think they compare, and that's usually why they answer similar questions because you're going to be working with them in close knit quarters on a team. So.
Yeah, it's a great question. I definitely agree with everything that Nicole and Sunny have shared. I think I would add two things. One is oftentimes you might have this hiring manager in a couple of the other rounds of interviews. And so you might want to say, oh, Sunny, I know that I shared this example with you, but it's a really great example. So, please indulge me. But I also say, mix up your answers, right? Make sure that you're giving, if you've been working for a while, make sure that you're giving examples from different places that you've worked at because organizations are hiring you not just for what you are doing currently, but your cumulative experiences. So I would be prepared. I mean, there usually are not, kind of crazy questions that are asked. So have a few different examples or some of your favorite stories that you are prepared because you just don't want to be repeating over and over and over again. I do think, at least in my experience, people are talking to each other about, the different candidates, and they definitely are comparing. And I mix it up a little.
Perfect. So we just wanted to make sure you were ready to go. I think you're ready to go. I'm sure you came here and had questions, so we want to turn it over to you. So you can raise your hand if your Zoom function is working in that way, and we can just go in order. But this is not for John and Jess to lead this session in that way. So who would like to ask? Kathy's ready. See? Ready, go, Kathy. Go ahead. You can unmute and ask.
Hi, thanks so much for this time and kind of giving your insights. So I was impacted by the federal cuts last year, and it's a very competitive job market. So my question is, how do you stand out? I'm in the international development sector, and so I'd love to get some insights on how do you stand out with other candidates who probably are coming in, while different, with very similar types of experiences. Especially looking at more senior or nonprofit roles.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll take that. We've seen a lot of that, Kathy, and I'm so sorry that you were impacted. It is a really competitive job market. Cover letters matter, and maybe it's a little bit more in the nonprofit sector where the mission alignment is really key. And so we always say that your resume is like your impact statement, and your cover letter is like your case for support. Why me? Why now? Right? So, Kathy, as a former, as a fundraiser, right, you want kind of understand those terms, but you have to make the case for yourself. And I really think that is where you can stand out, is your mission alignment, your familiarity. Perhaps, you have worked on the same types of issues. You don't want to be talking about funders because who knows if it's going to be the same funders, but being able to focus on your mission alignment will help to stand out. And I think on interviews, doing your due diligence and really sharing your passion for the mission of the work.
We'll go Brian and then Joel, and then all the recruiters don't have to answer each one. It's just up to you guys in regards to which one you feel like you can add to. So, Brian?
Yeah, first of all, thanks to the panel today. And I also worked at Telefund, loved the job. So glad to see there are a lot of Telefund alums on here. My question, is really just about building relationships with recruiters. And I'd like to just understand a little bit about, I can only imagine the amount of recs that you're working on and all the people that you're speaking to. But sometimes it just seems like there's communication issues or just delays. And I know this is kind of a general question and it probably, depends on the recruiter, but maybe it would be helpful if you just kind of walked us through what a typical day would be like for you so we can understand maybe why there are these delays or I've had a long-term relationship with a recruiter at a very large company and she's really been wonderful, but sometimes her communication is hit or miss. So kind of a very general question, but I'll pause there for the answer.
I think
I can take
yeah.
this
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Or I have like a follow-up
Yeah.
question. So, Brian, are you talking about communication when you are in consideration for a role and you're working with a recruiter, or more just sort of generally you have a more general relationship with a recruiter and you're just kind of checking in with them?
I think it's both. I've been working with a recruiter at a large organization and a role didn't work out, but she suggested that we stay in touch. And
Mhm.
so it's kind of just been on and off for the past couple of months. And I guess just as a follow-up question, is it good to be proactive as well? And you don't want to seem annoying. And I'm not like emailing every day, but checking in, every couple of weeks or every month or two. Kind of just, I know it's general and varies, but, would love to know some inside secrets.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I can share. I used to be at Disney. So large organization, we have a lot of roles we're constantly working on, I think, and we do try to stay in touch as much as possible. A lot of my time when I was working there was spent on the active roles that I had. What were the approved headcount that I could actually hire for? So oftentimes when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about who is a fit for that particular role, and that's sort of at top of mind. And the communication that goes along with that specific role is what we have to prioritize. So I know a lot of times it can feel like being on the job searching end, that there's all this like big gap of time that kind of goes by where we're not, maybe not as responsive. But I know that that's often because we're just sort of inundated with other things. Now, I'm not making any excuses for like recruiters and ghosting, and I've heard lots of stories. But I know that the majority of recruiters I've worked with, we really do try to have that communication and keep that communication open as quickly as we can. I think in terms of cadence, the thing that I would say is that, yes, day to day, if, if there's not a role that's open, it is hard to kind of have that kind of a lot of communication, because you may not be the only one that she's communicating with or the recruiter's communicating with. But I would leave the onus too on the applicants. So if they're reach out to, if there's a role that you seem to be a fit for or that aligns with your experience, at least in my experience at like a Disney, you needed to apply. So if there's something that's out there that says like, okay, I think I could be a fit for this, apply and then reach out to the recruiter and say, hey, I applied to this role. I know we talked before about a different opportunity. I think that this one could be a fit. And then that kind of, for me, would always flag, okay, yes, Brian would be a really good fit for this role, or I could kind of consider them, and then being able to kind of really like action quickly on there, and that like increases the communication. So that's always been really helpful. But just kind of sometimes it is hard on the recruitment end, from my experience, to hear somebody that like, oh, like, well, what do you have open? What do you do? Sometimes I know what's coming down the pipeline, but sometimes I don't. So I really need, you to be active, and if you're interested in a particular company, that you're really looking at what they're posting every day, to see if there's anything out there.
And does it, sorry, just quick follow-up. Does it hurt to, again, maybe organization, but especially at the larger ones, to apply to multiple roles, especially if the recruiter knows you?
In my experience, no. And that's just, the fintech organization I'm with now, Upstart, is a fairly big organization. Disney was obviously massive, and it did not hurt. The thought process was there is that, apply for as many things as you're interested in, and, shoot your shot. But I do say that one piece of advice I would give is don't apply for just everything either. Apply for the things that you are like, you do really connect with, that you are really interested in, and that that your experience lends to. Because what we don't want to see is that it becomes busy work of, Brian's always applying to every single role that's open. It makes it look like, even if you're just trying to get a foot in the door, it makes it look like you're not really valuing what the actual opportunity is.
Yep.
I would just add two things. One is, particularly if you're talking to a recruiter about a search, you should feel free to ask what the timeline is. Because if you're one of the very first people that a recruiter has spoken to, it may be a few weeks before the recruiter has any idea of how your candidacy may be moving forward. So be proactive and don't be afraid to ask about the timeline. Don't be afraid to follow up, right? If someone had said, okay, you'll hear back from me in 4 weeks and you haven't, I think that's fine. I definitely feel like be careful if you are applying for more than one role. At our firm, we have a policy. You can only be in one search at a time. But I know with some of our clients, they're like, oh, Jane is a serial applicant and it looks a little bit desperate. So if there are two roles that you're interested in, have a conversation with the recruiter about where you might be best aligned. The other thing too that I just want to say, please don't say that you're the perfect candidate. I can't tell you how many times I speak to people who are like, I am the perfect candidate. And I want to be like, really? Did you talk to my client? So just try not to say that. Even if you think you are, wait for that to be validated.
Also,
I'm loving the honesty. This is why we asked you to do this session. So,
really super quickly, I will also say, I try to, at the end of all of my interactions with possible candidates, I literally have started to put a message where I'm like, you may not hear from me for a few months. obviously this wasn't the right fit for you. Just know you will be always in my file system. Like if I have something, I will contact you. Because at least that's how I tend to like run my desk. Like even if somebody doesn't contact me for months, I have your resume. I will find you if I will find you if I need you, you know? But never think that you're annoying them either, because like I feel like my day, I feel most recruiters feel this way. The day doesn't really end unless you purposely make it end and you put your phone down and you start to cook dinner. So I feel like you reaching out, it's never an annoyance. I feel like it's always very appreciated because it reminds them and kind of brings you back to like top of mind. So
Perfect. I'm gonna move it over to Joel.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity here. And I was just wondering, as a recruiter, do you look at age very much in
well,
finding positions?
I definitely look at age because I recruit for like managing director level stuff. Like if somebody doesn't have over a certain amount of experience, like they just simply wouldn't be in the running for it. So I feel like for me, at least personally, that's we definitely look for. I guess age is correlated to experience, you know. But I do look for that. So
Yeah, well, see, I was a 30-year IBMer. I graduated Syracuse back in the late 70s, but I was a 30-year IBMer. I have a lot of experience in a lot of things. I was a stockbroker actually for Wells Fargo. And unfortunately, discrimination, he fired me and people of color out of his branch. You know, I worked in quantum physics. I was an engineer at IBM. And, you know, I have a lot of experiences. And my resume shows that, but I had to cut it down. One recruiter said, you know, cut some of the stuff out, but when you do that, you have gaps. And then people look at that and say, okay, what's all these gaps for? Well, I actually worked for a quantum physics company for that time, and they lost their funding from the Air Force, and that's why I'm not there. You know, and so when I say age, a lot of people, you know, get up in time and age, have a lot of experiences. You know, I was a mid-level manager. I ran a 400-person branch for IBM in California, but that doesn't seem to work. You know, because I have a lot of management experience. I have a lot of experiences, but what do you do when you get to an age? Because now IBM has retired me, but I'm still able to work. I'm still able to get out there and do stuff. I have a lot of experiences, you know. So what do you do? How does a recruiter handle that? Because most
Um,
recruiters I've spoken with can't handle, they don't know what to do. So I don't get callbacks.
I'm really sorry that's been your experience, Joel. I mean, as recruiters, we have to be very careful how we're coaching our clients, right? Because you cannot be discriminating about age. And I will also say to my clients, the question is, right, what will keep you here for a while, right? What are, and from a recruiter standpoint, right? What are you looking to do next? What's going to bring you joy, right? What is, I talk to a lot of folks who are kind of at that last chapter of their career, right? Do you want to consult? Do you want to be all in, right? Because 5 years from someone, if they're in their 60s or in their 40s, like, if someone is there, but I'll also say on the flip side, there are folks who are rising stars who, worked their tail off and achieved something, really spectacular. I look back on my own career. I was a director of development at age 30. I think they were crazy to hire me, but they saw something, right? So I think that, you have to present yourselves at whatever age you're at. What is the value that you are looking to bring? What is the problem that you are helping an organization to solve? And how can all of your lived experiences help an organization move forward in the next 3 to 5 years? So I think you have to find the right organization that will really value, Joel, what you are bringing to that role.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, Joel, too, because I know I do see this coming up and some of the roles that I've been recruiting for, and we have people that are a little bit more seasoned for the role. I think making it clear what your motivation is, too, is super helpful, because sort of like just calling out what is there. Hey, I know I have a lot of experience for this role, but I really would love to expand my experience in this certain area. And I'm looking to retire at a place, or I'm looking to kind of see where it brings me. I still have a lot to offer, I still have a lot to do. Having that motivation just stated is really helpful, I think, and having the recruiter being able to advocate for you, because we work with our clients, we work with our hiring managers to make sure that we're not discriminating, or having bias against different groups. And so I think that that's really helpful.
Is like I said, I was with IBM for quite a while, and when I talk to my neighbors here in Lafayette, many of them are not with a company 5 years. People get hired and they get laid off. Company closes. So people look at me and say, "You got a lot of experience." Yeah, I do, but they don't, only because of the way the economy, I guess, is working. And they're not with companies. So if I say I want to be here 5 to 10 years, they may not be there 5 to 10 years. And I do have a lot to offer, I think, even if it's 3 years. But I don't. I'm not getting that. That's all. That's all. And I have really, the only people I have found that have any time longevity in a business are those of my age who've been around a long time, and because of the layoffs and whatnot, we're not working. So it's a convoluted and interesting work environment for us. So, and I do appreciate that comment, though.
Joel, I just want to jump in. I appreciate you sharing your question and your experience. I know this is something that a lot of people in this room and all over are wondering about, so thank you.
Okay, no, thank you.
Lisa, I'm going to throw it over to you next. You've had your hand up here for a few minutes. Go ahead and ask your question.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. My question was really, if you're blessed to have a long severance and you decide to take some of that time for yourself, how do you spend that gap time when interviewing?
So I would name it. I think during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people who took time off to be doing caregiving, right? Put it on there. I have seen people say they took a hiatus. I talked to one candidate and they had a long severance. They wrote a book. Other people have traveled. You don't want to have questions on your resume. And so, I know that when I'm presenting resumes to a client, I want them to think, wow, I can't wait to learn more, rather than like, I wonder why Wendy sent this resume. So, I think as transparent as you are comfortable. I think that it's okay to name what it is. I do think that there's lots of questions about layoffs. We're seeing tons of layoffs, especially in higher education at all different levels. So I would, think a little bit about wordsmithing. But I think that there's, at least in the nonprofit sector, there's a greater level of understanding, particularly looking at the pandemic, particularly looking at the huge amount of layoffs that have happened in the past 18 months. So I wouldn't be afraid to put it on there.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh no, please. I definitely agree with Wendy. She's totally correct. I feel like in the financial services and the private equity space, a big thing, people get laid off. I've been laid off before. Like, it's going, not that it sounds threatening, it's going to happen, but it happens. I think one of the most pertinent things somebody could do is pursue some form of, like, I wouldn't say complete higher education. For example, I just had a candidate interview recently. She got the job, yay. She was laid off for almost a year. During that time, she took a very specific niche accounting class, like a fund accounting class, when she couldn't get work. And the client was very impressed with that. They're like, "You had initiative." She also had a part-time job. She was working as a server, which she joked about during her interview. I think the most important thing is to not be like freaked out or feel like, oh, this is something that's going to, work against me. The truth of the matter is that if the client likes your personality and you have the work experience, they will interview you. It's the recruiter's job to advocate for the interview. But yeah, at least if anybody out there is in, private equity or doing, financial services, insurance, I always say a class is always a great way to, one, it's a good life experience, but it is just in general impressive to see on a resume.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, Kenneth, you're up next.
Yeah, hi, hello. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for setting this up for all these wonderful SU alums that are looking into getting either deeper connections or a better understanding about recruiters. My question is, I've been in this internship role for a couple of months now, and they've been very helpful in trying to get me an active job once the internship is over. And so they've been talking about, making all these deeper connections. And they've also told me that, hey, if you have these connections with a certain company, even if you don't really know the guy, but if you share an SU alum, you might get a better chance of getting a response or even getting an interview. So my question is, how do I make these serious connections to kind of give me a better advantage into getting a response or to getting an interview set up?
I
I
would
think, oh,
say,
sorry.
look, I think first of all, if I think everyone on this screen can attest, the Syracuse Alumni Network is huge, right? If a resume from someone who went to Syracuse comes across my desk, I will 100% have a conversation. I would also say, Kenneth, to maximize LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a recruiter's best friend. It is a great way to network. It is a great way to, build relationships with people who you can see who are in similar jobs. So I would also make sure that your LinkedIn profile, that you filled out everything that you possibly can. They have a really meaningful about section, so that you can be found by people and you can find other people. But, it's kind of like any job that you have to do cold calling. You have to be a little bit fearless, make the connection. But I would also maximize LinkedIn because maybe there's someone who you really want to meet. You haven't met them before, but maybe you have 2 or 3 mutual connections. So LinkedIn is just so fabulous for, for networking, especially in job searches.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Katie, we have you up next. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Katie. I just graduated in May, so I'm still early in my career. So I'm in the job application process right now. I'm like in the middle of interviewing and applying, so I'm in that whole fun area. But I wanted to ask about AI. Going through resumes, it seems like from your experience, you guys can like look at them. But I've been applying to a lot of jobs, like you said on LinkedIn, and sometimes we'll have like hundreds, sometimes thousands of applicants. And sometimes I'll feel like very passionate or like I feel like my experience aligns perfectly with certain jobs, but my resume never even gets or cover letter never gets read. Um, and like, no one ever looks at it. And then I'll eat like LinkedIn message to the recruiter or someone on the team, and I still don't get anything. And I feel like I get other responses back from jobs as like I'm not as qualified for, I'm not as passionate about. So I was wondering how someone can reach out to you on LinkedIn maybe earlier in their career and still get noticed and like get a response back, or if we should connect versus like message. There's like, I don't know, it's different on LinkedIn. So trying to use LinkedIn to my advantage, like you said, but trying to get that first initial like response back. Thank you.
This is, I mean, this is a tough one that's come up, right? So I utilize AI in all of my searches right now. It's just part of how I recruit, especially when we have a high volume of applicants. I say going back to the job description and making sure that your resume really aligns so that we can discover. I still look at the applicants. I don't rely on AI. So as much, it might bring some people to the top, but you can kind of see quickly that it might not give you exactly what you want. So I think most recruiters are still looking at people outside of what AI is providing. It's a competitive market. I think you're doing all of the right things, and that's the advice I would give is to try to find the recruitment team, to try to find somebody that works at the organization that you're connected with, to continue to network and develop relationships with people and make connections on LinkedIn. All of those things really do help. And even just being able to give visibility to your resume. Wendy, I don't know if there's anything that you would add on your end, or if you see
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an experience that my older son just had. My older son is 25. He's 3 years out of college, applied for a job, and immediately, like in like 12 hours, got a rejection. And he was like, okay, this was definitely AI. He knew that his former boss knew someone at this organization. and he reached out to his former boss, and he's kind of done the same with some of his professors. He works in sports management, and he said, I just applied for this job. I think that you know someone there. Would you reach out on my behalf? His former boss did. He got the interview and he got the job. So I do think that very large organizations are using AI. It's screening out like way too many people because my son was like right in the bullseye of being qualified. So what I would say is don't give up, especially if you know that you have some connections, especially if maybe you had some internships or summer jobs that are like right in the sweet spot of the role or the organization. But I'd also say, like, be persistent. Don't give up. You're going to get that first job. It might not be your dream job, but it's your first job. But I would definitely, what I've seen from my son, he has stayed in really close connection with his advisor, his favorite professors, his mentors in school. So you have so many people in the Syracuse community who want to help you. Don't be afraid to maximize all of that.
Fantastic, Wendy. And I just wanted to give voice really quick to a link that Jess just put in the chat a moment ago. So we have a great tool and website and platform called Ask Orange Alumni, and it essentially uses AI for good in the career space. So it basically is going to help match you with Syracuse alumni who are a fit based on you and your background and a specific question that you ask. So it's a really great resource for those of you who haven't seen that yet. There's also the LinkedIn Alumni Search Tool, which I'm just throwing into the chat right now. So those are two of the best ways to really utilize our network, grow your connections, and build a strategic network so that you've got some folks hopefully sitting in some key places when the time is right. All right, let's flip it over to Peju is next. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Peju. I graduated in 2005, and my career has never been on like an upward trajectory. It's been kind of plateaued and stagnant. I did a lot of contractual work in the early aughts, and then I finally got. Anyways, I'm not gonna go through my whole spiel. My whole point is like I've been applying. I've work at a company now, and I've like talked to recruiters. I talked to hiring managers. I think the interviewing is like my biggest struggle, but I'm trying to look at jobs outside of my current company since it's not happening here. How important is a cover letter? Because I feel like those don't even get read, and I put so much time and effort into them. And I feel like I tailor my resume to every job I apply to. I use AI for everything, even though it's like a love-hate relationship, but and it doesn't seem to be getting me anywhere. Like what practical advice do you have for like cover letter writing? I use LinkedIn, and like sometimes like I'll look at a job and I'll try and connect with somebody if they're like a second or first, or not first, but like a second or third. I'll reach out to them. And even LinkedIn, you can't just message people anymore now. You have to have premium to be able to even send an in message or a note or something like that. And that just, I don't want to pay for premium because when I had it, it wasn't very advantageous. So what like practical advice can you give to those types of like issues I'm coming across?
I'm not sure if Nicole and Wendy feel similarly. I also have been recruiting obviously for like a far less amount of time, but this is what I have personally found. The cover letters, none of my clients read them, genuinely. We don't even ask the candidate to send them just because the pace of what we're recruiting at, like it's just not a necessity. I think that it's wonderful the amount of time that you put into it, and I feel like it's great because the more cover letters that you wrote, you probably understand your own story even better. When you talk on interviews, it probably gives you a little bit of peace of mind. You can always kind of go back to that rhetoric that you wrote. But I definitely would say to maybe transition your efforts away from the cover letter and a bit more into like a networking. Like the best way to be able to get a job is through person to person connection, especially today with all the AI. And I feel like with the surplus of just people like flooding applications. So I feel like my advice is take a little break from the cover letter. I'm sure that you kind of have it down pat. And I won't say like, I don't want to make you spend your money on premium, but I would say maybe do some research, go to like the websites of the, companies that you want to apply to, see if you can get a few emails out of them. Maybe not even a hiring manager, maybe even if you wanted to email like somebody on the team where you're like, hi, like, you're doing the job that I really would like to be doing. Maybe we could just chit chat, maybe have a call for like 15 minutes. But my advice is to transition your efforts.
I hear you, but then why do certain jobs still require it? Like,
Oh, like within the application.
yes, in the
Yeah.
application they require it.
Yeah,
And
I
then
was
I
gonna
don't feel like that they're getting read.
So I think it depends on the industry. I think if on the application it's requiring a cover letter, then you got to do it. I would say in the nonprofit sector, cover letters are read because they're looking for a story. If this is a job that is writing, they're really going to pay attention. I also want to kind of amplify what Sunny said about networking. Perhaps there are some professional organizations that you can join where they have either virtual meetings or meetings in real life that you can be developing those personal relationships. So I absolutely agree. Build your personal network.
Thank you.
All right. So Jennifer Levin is the next one on my list. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you all for coming. This is super helpful. I live in LA and work on like the film and music side of the industry. I network a lot. I love talking with people. I'm very much a people person, but similar to a few of the questions previously, just touching on AI again, I find that I've recently previously have gotten all my jobs through word of mouth and through talking with people. Now I'm trying to like take a turn and like go to a bigger company that gets these hundreds of resumes. I guess I throw my resume into AI to grade it to see how it does in comparison to the job description. And then like that I wrote personally, and then I find that I'm like putting all these keywords in there after using AI and making sure the phrases are perfect to AI. I guess, and I just get worried that it sounds too generic and it could sound exactly like somebody else's resume because they're doing the same thing. I guess, is there like what's the right balance there? And then also, I hate to ask this question. I just like AI complicates it all, but is there like a specific AI or ATS system that's primarily used in the film industry? Because I know a lot of these companies use Workday, and I know that there's a specific AI system attached with Workday. Yeah, that's kind of my question.
Well, there's not necessarily a specific AI system that's connected with Workday. So
Okay, good to
there's a
know.
lot of companies that use Workday and they use it in a couple different ways. And if they're using it as their ATS, they're usually having an add-on of another company that or another system that does their AI. And when I say their AI, it's just an overlay. So the recruiter, in my experience, often still has control about what comes in. Um, I will say in the last couple of years, as I've seen the prevalence of AI rising, a lot of the resumes do sound similar. I love to hear, like you utilize like your own writing, your own words, but as long as the experience comes across, that's really what I'm looking for. So I don't feel like a lot of people are necessarily judging your sense of writing style. They just want to see that the experience is there and then have the conversation. In entertainment, my experience has been that it is hard to shift from the word of mouth, and that we were constantly trying to kind of like move forward and considering candidates that weren't just referred to the job or weren't just networked in. And so I know that that is harder to overcome, but it still is very prevalent. And so I think just kind of what we were talking about before and what Sunny and Wendy have highlighted too is just like kind of having that network. It does, it is sort of the most helpful when we're have a high volume of applicants. Does
Okay,
that
great.
answer your question?
Yes, I guess like following up on that, like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like testing a bunch of different resumes to see what hits, like at these larger companies that have so many postings. I guess, do you guys internally keep track of all those resumes, and will that work like go against me for changing it and altering it per job posting, or even like if it were the same job?
I don't, at least for me personally, we have a large like data collection. We create profiles for each one of our candidates. We just plug in the resumes that they send as they apply to our jobs. The the actual platform actually will change it. Like it'll just update it. So at least in our case, like it's not going to keep all those ones on file. When you submit to the most recent job, we presume that is your most recent resume. And we're just like, bam, like this is her actual, this is her new experience. So if you use like a different verb, like it's not going to act, at least in my experience, it wouldn't affect you. So.
Okay, great. Thank
I would
you.
agree.
All right, so we had a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat as we've gone through the session too. So wanted to circle back to those real quick. So Karen Siebold, they've got a question from you. Um, I can go ahead and read this. So I'm interested in hearing about neurodivergent candidate issues, how to best support autistic job seekers with college degrees. So I'll let the panel take that one.
So I love that question. And I think it's really personal, what you wish to share with a recruiter. And then the recruiter has to ask what you want them to share with the company. And I think the question is, what I have found is that people's differences can be incredible assets to an organization. I have also found with people with different physical abilities, sometimes they will talk about the accommodations that they need. But in many cases, it doesn't come up because someone's background and experiences really speaks for itself. So I would say that's a choice that want to share in terms of, what is the value that you're bringing to an organization? How are you helping to solve the challenges that this position is hiring for? How are you preparing? What are the questions that you're asking? But be careful what you are sharing, because it can, be an asset. But you also want to kind of make sure that what you are sharing also informs how you will be welcomed and accepted in the organization. So, I think it's on you for what you want to share.
Okay, now I'll say thanks, Wendy, after I'm not muted. John, where did you want to go next?
So I know Salil just put a question into the chat, so I was thinking maybe we'll go there next. Salil, do you want to come off mute, or do you want me to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, sure. I could ask. So I am like seeking entry-level roles. I graduated from Syracuse a couple years ago, and I had a job for a little under a year before I was laid off. So like I keep hearing that like networking is like again like the key thing nowadays to I guess stand out or to basically stand out now. But whenever like I try messaging people on LinkedIn, I don't really get responses. So I am wondering like what are ways to stand out and like get responses in that kind of way.
At least for me, I think the short and sweet, the shorter and sweeter, the better. I feel at least what I've seen is a lot of times people will send me very large paragraphs, and it sounds terrible, but I'm like, I'm reading so many things during the day. I'm like, I have to actually read a candidate's interview. I'm about to read another, job description. I'm trying to read notes that a hiring manager sent me. When I get a giant thing, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I'll read that tonight. And sometimes I don't. I go to bed. I think at least I think the best way is just very short. Hi, my name is yada yada. I do yada yada. I saw you. Here's my number. I would love to just have a quick call. Do you have like 10 minutes to chat with me this week? And normally I'm like, yeah, I have 10 minutes in my day. I'm like, I have a quick like walk from like my lunch break to like back to my desk. So I think that for me, I think that's a great way to do it. So.
Yeah, and I would just add that the short and sweet message always sort of works with me if you just want to connect, right? Like, hey, I'm an SU alumni. I love, like, I'm growing my network. I'd love to connect. Great. If you have a specific ask, then I would just make sure that it's pertinent to me. Like, I have a lot of people that reach out and they have technical backgrounds and they're like, hey, I went to SU, or hey, I have, this experience and I'm looking for a technical job. And, my response when I get to it is usually like, I've not recruited in the tech space much. So like, I don't think that I would be the best to help you, but happy to stay connected. So just as like the short and sweet message, if you're just looking for to connect, but if you are asking, if you have an ask there, just make sure that it's pertinent to the person that you're asking.
Yeah, I would just also say, if you're reaching out to say, I'd like to work at your company and there is no entry level jobs, then you're probably not going to get a response. When I worked in fundraising, there was an adage, ask for advice, you get money, ask for money, you get advice. So, at this stage in your career, ask for advice. Find people who are doing something that would be your dream job and ask them to share their story with you. Build that relationship, build that network, and you may have that chance of, keeping that person in your network when they have a role that seems to be aligned. But I echo what Sunny and Nicole said. Be specific in what you are asking for, and definitely keep it short.
Thank you.
I just wanted to chime in since John and I answer these kind of questions all the time too, is that we always tell people to say the first line as something so blatant, like hello to a fellow SU alum. Oh, you're not a complete stranger, right? So even though I don't know you, at least I already know we have a connection. And I always tell people to make their ask very clear. So in addition to what Sunny said of making it short, I tell people their message should never be longer than 3 sentences. So, hello to a fellow SU alum is your first sentence. And then after that, you have two more. And that's about it. And then you should make it super clear. Do you want 10 minutes of their time, or do you have a very clear question to be asking them? I know we only have a couple minutes left, and if somebody still has a burning one, we want to get to it. But I wanted to ask the recruiters if they would take a moment and put the way that they want to be contacted. I know we talked about LinkedIn links, but if that's what you prefer. So we are trying, right? So John and I are here. We're the two full-time staff within the office. If you've met Pim, she's lovely and also offers one-on-ones for alumni as well. So while we can't be all things to all people, what we've started with are these industry groups on LinkedIn. So I've put 3 links in the chat. I do hope you'll take a look at them. While I don't think any one thing solves all of the problems, these LinkedIn groups will allow you to see an entire directory of alumni who want to connect with fellow alumni in that industry area. So we're starting with these 3 mostly because of capacity and those types of things. So if any of those resonate with you, there's one for health, human services, and social impact, another for sport, entertainment, and media, and another for anything related to STEM. So please stay tuned. We do have a website for alumni career services, but specifically within that, we have a subsection that says ways to connect with fellow alumni, and we have a list of all of those ways since networking has come up a number of times in this session. So we're at 12:56 my time zone. Is there anyone else who would like to ask something before we tell you we hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, and I believe someone responded to it, so thank you. I just want to go back to the layoff question again, and maybe just, I think this has been a very tough couple of years for people affected by layoffs in the job market. And I was actually trying to find a new job before I was laid off. I don't think much has changed when I brought it up, but I feel like I'm going to know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Like, is it a disadvantage, like, to kind of be in that situation? I heard some good advice about skills, etc. And also, when do you start to think someone is maybe getting a little bit stale? Does that become kind of an issue?
So I think you need to be upfront. I think many people over the course of their careers were laid off. I was laid off at an early age, and I don't know any industry that hasn't been impacted, in the past 5 years or 6 years by layoffs. So, I would be honest, maybe you were a first round, maybe a second round, maybe a third round of layoffs. I don't know what you mean by stale, but I think just, be upfront and be upfront with thinking about, what is it that you want to do next, right? When you are laid off and you have some time, you're able to think about what do I enjoy? What am I really, really good at? What am I passionate about? What do I want in meaning in my next role? So I would just be upfront with
Yeah,
that.
I think
Again,
by
I'm just
scale,
speaking from the nonprofit industry.
what I meant was I think it's a job market where you're looking at like maybe a minimum of 3 months to 6 months. I've heard longer. I'm sure there's others who, been through it longer. So it's just taking longer to find your next, I think.
Yep.
And that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes it can take a while. And that's just the reality. There's so many people who've been laid off. I think Nicole talking about it before. Sometimes searches take more time. I'm definitely finding that our clients are a bit more risk averse than they were previously. I think candidates are waiting for, as perfect a job as possible. You don't want to be part of another layoff. So I think we are finding it's taking a little bit longer for people who've been laid off to find a new job.
And I
I
don't think that I just wanted to add, I don't think that it shows up poorly on you at all. I mean, this question every day I talk to people that are laid off. I issue my apologies. I was laid off and impacted for almost a year. So I think, kind of coming from that, people don't think about when a company does layoffs that talent acquisition, the team that does the hiring gets laid off too.
Mhm.
So it is something that I think most recruiters feel very familiar with, and it's not held against anybody. And it doesn't, a few years ago, it might have seemed like, oh, they got laid off. Why didn't they keep them? But now it's just become so commonplace that no one is sort of judging you or how long you've been laid off, or that you've been laid off multiple times, because it typically is not a reflection of your experience.
I do completely agree. Yeah, I just to reiterate, and I've been talking to a lot of people who are, they graduated only a couple of years ago, and I really do understand the fear. I'm similar to Nicole. I was impacted. I was laid off for over a year. I was stressing. I was like, I'm never gonna work again. I'm like, I'm gonna have to, I don't even know, live out in the woods. I got very, very scared. And I get that because without work, you're left without insurance. Like the real life impact is insane. But I will say that, kind of reiterating, what Wendy and Nicole were saying, it is persistence, and it's awful, and it is very like daunting at times. Which is wonderful that like SU does these panels so we can give you advice and you can meet each other and connect with each other. But just know that from a recruiter perspective, we're never viewing somebody as like, like past the date or stale, or like, it's really about the experience. Sometimes I think I'm so lucky. I find somebody, they've been laid off for a year. They were doing exactly what I need. I know that they're not working. I know that they're looking for a job, and it's actually very auspicious. But yes, we definitely get the fear, but we will definitely, there is no, what's the word? Like, there's not a hindrance if you have that. So
Mhm. I love how honest all of you have been. I feel like so this idea came out of our in-person career retreats that we've done in different cities because those went so well and we thought why not do it virtually. Um I know this might sound like a shameless plug, but I'm realizing that I think the two things go together. What so many of you are saying before we again wish you a great Tuesday, because now we've gone over on time, but I think you're engaged enough to stay here for another minute, is just to say this is actually why John and I came with this approach. Put it in the chat, and it's probably lost now in how far up it is, but we know people feel alone in this. And so we genuinely felt like, why wouldn't we want to approach sessions from the group perspective? So we do have two in August coming up that will focus on resumes and LinkedIn and networking and things like that. So I just want to throw it out there because as much as it might be vulnerable to ask for career support, the reality is that so many people need it. Even if they have a job, sometimes we just are looking for the next thing just to look for it too. So I can see John because your thing pops up and you're a great colleague and I say it and then it appears. So I just really want to thank Wendy, Nicole, and Sunny. So if you have lovely things to say to them, please throw them in the chat before you run to whatever it is that you have to do next. But when people are willing to share their insight and their advice, we really appreciate it. So thank you genuinely for the three of you. This is how you spent your lunch break. So thank you so much. And for the alums who came today. So we just hope we'll see your face at something else. And we'll see you again soon.